TopMedTalk.
Nick Jerrison here. Welcome to TopMedTalk, and welcome to this, a very special edition of TopMedTalk, Anesthesiology at Retrospective. Here we're looking at the ASA, the American Society of Anesthesiology, and their annual general meeting, which this year we will be covering, as usual, 21st of October, Anesthesiology 2022. More details about that coming up, exclusive access via EdPom. More details about that to follow as well. In today's programme, though, we're going to be looking back over some of the conversations we've had with past presidents and the current president of the ASA. Over the years, we've spoken to many presidents of the ASA, but we're going to start our look back around 2019 with Linda Mason. Linda Mason was, of course, the president of the ASA in 2019, and we had a conversation with her at Euro Anesthesia 2019 in Vienna. Appropriately enough, we had a conversation about the international nature of the ASA conference. We discussed the opioid crisis, which of course is still big news now, and was a hot topic back then as well. Links to all of these conversations are available in the show notes if you want to hear the full discussion. However, we're going to highlight a few pieces for you here. First of all, we're going to start with the preoccupation and concern about brain health. How does anesthesiology tie into that? Have a listen.
Well, this is something that naturally is starting to get near and dear to my heart because all of us are going to age eventually, and we may need an anesthetic. And there have been people that have told us in the past, Grandma had an anesthetic and she just wasn't quite the same when she woke up. And now we're realizing that these observations are actually true. And we're trying to delve into which patients would be the most susceptible to having a problem under anesthesia. We're looking at frailty index. There's a test where they draw a clock ahead of time and then they remember 3 numbers and to see if they can do that before they anesthetic. Yeah. And then if they're having trouble already, these may be very soft signs of cognitive dysfunction, but they're magnified after anesthesia. So this is really, the Brain Health Initiative is really one of our top initiatives for the future. We've got a great team working on it. We're partnering with the European Society on Brain Health. And I think this is something that all of us are going to want to know, the aging of America. Yeah. I was reading the other day that people over 100 years, they're the second fastest growing group in America. And the 90-year-olds are the next ones. So it's a different world. So we want to be sure that we understand the differences in age and anesthesia and surgery.
Yeah, those are all topics that we cover on TopMedTalk quite a bit, actually, on those 3. Yeah.
For more information about the Brain Health Initiative, please check out the show notes to this podcast. Also, when we spoke to Linda, we had a remarkably prescient focus upon burnout and taking care of yourself. This, of course, before the COVID-19 crisis began, but a lot of this applied very much during that period. Have a listen.
I think we haven't taken good enough of care of ourselves as a specialty. We know that the suicide rate among anesthesiologists is probably the highest in all specialties, not only because maybe of this pressure and stress, but let's face it, we have drugs and we know how to use them. So people, when they get depressed and sad, they may turn to that instead of, I think the important thing is also having someone that you can trust to talk to. And we want to be sure that there are support groups that can be there for people, because sometimes these are transient. And if you can get them through these periods, then they're going to move on to back into a productive career. Yeah. The other thing is burnout. And if you look at the production pressure we're facing, I think that has increased the burnout a lot. Yeah. Get the case started, get it going faster, do more in one day, just that. And after a while, I think people just get, frankly, tired. Yeah. And then if that continues, then they can go into a real depression and have the problem with, not feeling good about themselves or feeling good. And it also affects families. Oh, it affects families. It does. It carries home from work, and people have problems with their families, divorces, and also sometimes substance and alcohol abuse.
Because as you were referring to earlier, if many of us may be looking forward to living to be 100, we ain't going to be retiring at 65.
No way.
So we got to make that work somehow.
Absolutely. And I think, we're going to see people working very productively much longer than 65, into their 70s.
Linda Mason there. And before we let her go, let's just have a little last piece of advice from her.
Please visit us at www.asahq.org. We have a wonderful website. It's been updated recently. You can find it about brain health. You can find about we have a registry for drug shortages. If you go there you go into the drug shortage registry, you can say, I'm missing epinephrine, I'm missing atropine. And this information is transmitted right to some of the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA. And so we have things on brain health, wellness, drug shortages, and combating the opioid crisis in this country.
Linda Mason there. ASAHQ.org is the website for the American Society of Anesthesiologists. Moving now to 2020's president, Mary Dale Peterson. We had a conversation with her back in 2021 at the American Society of Anesthesiologists annual general meeting. Here she introduces herself.
In my other professional life, I am actually by training a pediatric anesthesiologist and boarded in intensive care medicine as well. But the last few years, I've really concentrated on administrative responsibilities. So I am now the Chief Operating Officer for our healthcare system, which is Driscoll Children's Healthcare System. And so I'm over the hospital, the physician practice group, and our health plan. Actually, I was president of our health plan for about 13 years with about 230,000, mostly children actually, but pregnant women and a Medicaid program.
Mary gave us a lot of food for thought on the subject of the leadership position that anesthesiologists often take. Is this something that's a natural part of the role of the anesthesiologist?
And I've been asked more recently to do a lot more talks and visit with people on leadership and what does it take to be a leader. But people have, I think, a lot of those qualities that they can build on if they think about it. And I think what's really put a fine point on some of these qualities has been the crisis of the pandemic. One of the biggest qualities is humility. I think humility is what really makes a great physician, knowing when you don't know something, knowing when to ask for help when there's a crisis. And it's also, not being a know-it-all or think you know everything, even though you may be a very smart and well-educated person. Yeah. But I think we learned that as leaders in healthcare systems during the pandemic. We have about 3,000 in our organization, and it's like, here are the rules right now based on this evidence. And then, then the rules change.
2 days later, they change.
And so I started preempting the guidance is by saying, this is what we know today. Yeah. And this is what we're doing today based on what we know. And that really could change tomorrow. But what you have to learn as a leader, and this gets into my next point, is about 80% of people are concrete thinkers. Yeah. And 20% are a little bit more abstract, and they can deal with this change. It's very hard for people dealing with continuous change. Yeah. And so that's where I think another quality of being a good leader is communication. I'm still learning that. I think that's where our failures, whether it's in patient care and doing handoffs or as a system in communicating.
What is it about anesthesiology that makes practitioners so uniquely suited to a leadership position?
Well, I am biased on this, of course, but I think anesthesiologists can make incredible leaders in a hospital or a healthcare organization, and I'll tell you why. Number one, the ORs and the ICUs, which we know intimately well, are the economic engines for that whole health system. They are the economic engines. You are not making a lot of margin on your med-surg floors. It is the ORs and the ICUs. And I know Saul's done a lot of work in this area, but if you can create value in that, in that whole continuum of care, all the way from prehabilitation to post-habilitation, and really design that journey, getting the right patients for the right procedures at the right time in an optimal condition, hospitals can do very well. I think we are detail-oriented enough and we know how to organize things, but I also think we're really great at Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and crisis management, which unfortunately a lot of systems have had to deal with. And so learning, and we had this in the ASA, learning about, when COVID hit, every week I would get with the CEO, Paul, and I said, these are the 3 things we need to do this week. So there's a whole lot of things out there, but you have to focus on the 3 things. And one of the top priorities should always be, it's about the people. It's about the people. And for me, as an ASA leader, it was about the people that were taking care of the patients. It's kind of like, in the airplane, you put your mask on first before you do it with your child, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the anesthesiologist needs to have protection and PPE so they're not sick and out of the workforce being able to take care of it. So we were the first medical organization to advocate for full N95 PPE for anesthesiologists. I mean, I had an anesthesiologist that contacted me that was fired from a hospital for wearing PPE. Literally. I mean, this is this nonsense that was going on. So it is about the people so we can take care of the patients.
Without question, the ASA rose to the challenge of COVID-19. It did so in many different ways, but as Mary explains, sometimes it was as simple as just having someone to listen.
And sometimes you may not even have the answer for them. I had so many ASA members writing to me, during my presidency, during COVID, and it was hard. You had women writing in saying, I have 2 young children at home. I have, an elderly parent living with me. And I go to work, and this is, of course, before vaccines. I go to work, and I just live in fear that I'm going to bring this home to my family. And of course, I'm living with 2 87-year-old women as well. And then I have a college student. It's multi-generational. Should I be living in the basement, or is it okay if I shower and then go into my house? I can't tell them that. But I can be a good listener. I can be empathetic. I can thank them for what they are trying to do in saving patients' lives and still protecting their family. And so I think when they see that you care about them and their families, and their families, when you ask them to do something extra, they're willing to do that.
Yeah, great point. Finally, we concluded our conversation with Mary by asking her about the future of anesthesiology as a specialty. Is it still something that bright young students are well placed to get involved in?
Things that you're going to be dealing with in anesthesiology in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Well, I think we have a lot of core issues, and it's really, unfortunately, around economics. It's, ensuring that we get appropriate payment for services. All your anesthesiologists that are looking at this know that we're in a different payment system than the rest of medicine, and we have to continue to work on that. That was my number one thing coming into the ASA presidency that I wanted to concentrate on. We got a little bit sidetracked with COVID. I mean, we were still working on it, but not to the degree that we need to, and really it is our number one priority, whether it's, the No Surprises Act. We obviously don't want patients to have surprise medical bills, and we worked very hard to get appropriate language in the legislation, and unfortunately we now have the interim final rule that completely ignored what was written in legislation. So now we're working on how do we figure that out. I think it's about workforce. I think people are feeling the pinch. To your point, Monty, a lot of people are retiring, and people are not wanting to work the 80 hours that maybe we did initially. We're not in that place anymore, and that's fine. I think that's good, actually, but we've got to figure out how to get more folks in the pipeline, even though anesthesiologists has been so blessed because we actually have more demand to become an anesthesiologist than we have positions open. So it's really encouraging everybody to open up more anesthesiology residency positions so we can increase that pipeline to take care of patients. And so I think those are really 2 really big issues that are facing the specialty. But there's so much other positive, exciting things, just the science, the silver linings that we've learned about the pandemic, the science, the mRNA technology, learning how to utilize technology better to our advantage in communication and outreach, our teletown halls. So I'm so, I think there's a very bright future. And my middle son is actually an anesthesiologist. It's just his first year in private practice. And his dad, my husband's a cardiologist. He could have chosen that. I did not really try to steer him into anesthesia, but once he took one preceptor course at UTMB in anesthesia, nothing else matched up to it.
Mary Dale Peterson. You're listening to TopMedTalk, and this podcast is a special celebration of the long relationship that TopMedTalk and the ASA have. We actually celebrated our first official broadcast from the ASA 5 years ago. And if you check out ebpom.org, you can find out some of the special offers that we are offering you to get involved as part of our birthday celebrations. Check out ebpom.org now. Meanwhile, let's get back to the ASA and our conversations with the presidents across the years. We had a conversation with the current and most recent past president quite recently here on TopMedTalk. Links in the show notes if you want to hear the fuller conversation. But first of all, 2021 ASA President Beverly Phillip explained why she did not allow herself to see the COVID-19 crisis as a struggle. Have a listen.
Let's start with the positive aspects of this last year.
Well, I've never seen it a struggle. For me, their obstacles are an opportunity to get around them, get over them, find a way towards a positive future. And this year has been really no different that way at all. I think the challenges actually have remained the same with the 2021 version, but the same. And our challenge has always been, as an organization, is to find our own future, to ignore the chatter of the universe, and that we decide who we want to be as a specialty. That has not changed. The operating room, we are the physicians of the operating room, but we are the perioperative physicians. There is no other physicians that have the knowledge, the expertise in knowing how to make a patient have the safest possible anesthesia, and you have to do that in advance.
Yeah,
and I think even having with the COVID that is around us, this has even amplified that to a very large degree, because now people are having new chronic illness that they have come into with this disease, and it is on us to make sure that patients are at their best.
Mary spoke about how that affected her focus.
Yeah. So what I did this year is I started a committee on perioperative medicine, to give some, as we've been saying, discussing among ourselves, putting some meat on this proposition, and that to look at what do we need. We need education in the area. What would a fellowship in perioperative medicine look like? What data do we need to collect? How are we going to make this real? And I think we are. I think that the pandemic has given us the nudge to really get going on this in a way that has been, I think, hugely valuable. And the other part, because you talk about collaborating with other societies, that's been another amazing side benefit to this pandemic. People, because of the real PR push that our specialty has had, being leaders in solving and addressing problems. So now we're talking with other medical specialties in ways that just did not happen.
Yeah, one of those silver linings.
And in this conversation, we also spoke with Randall Clark, the new president of the ASA, who, of course, has been holding the position this year.
And to your question about the visibility of the specialty during the pandemic, it's been absolutely amazing to have anesthesiologists recognized from the White House, from the COVID group at the White House by the Vice President, recognizing the contributions of Dale Peterson, the immediate past president, is truly extraordinary. At that time, it's important to note, we were looking at the potential. We didn't know for sure, but we were looking at the potential for ICUs to be overwhelmed in several parts of the country. We were running out of ventilators, and there were some strategies being discussed that were potentially quite dangerous for all patients that would be involved with those. And the ASA brought forward our ability to help in both critical care medicine and through ventilation with 70 to 80,000 anesthesia ventilators that we have in operating rooms and procedural areas across the country. That provided a huge sigh of relief, and it really identified anesthesiologists as the problem solvers that we are, but also as the ability to address a bunch of different types of care, because that's what we have to do when we take care of patients in the operating room.
Definitely.
TopMedTalk has, of course, conducted a number of other interviews with past ASA presidents, including Dan Cole, who gets a mention now and is celebrated for his foresight.
Dan Cole, former ASA president, I describe him as a quiet genius, saw the need for anesthesiology to investigate population health. Most of us thinking about the topic really think of it from an aspect of primary care and systems of care outside of hospitals. But there's so much work, so much critical work done in hospitals, it has to be incorporated to be part of the pie for population health to be successful. So, as you well know, we put substantial resources into working on identifying how anesthesiology can be more involved in population health. It really comes down to the partnerships you're able to forge with your healthcare system. If the healthcare system embraces the concept and they're ready to move forward, I think we've seen examples that are relatively successful, as you well know. If those systems are not quite there yet, there's not much progress being made. But when we look at some of the challenges related to payment and other issues, taking a global approach, including a population health type approach, will be absolutely essential for us to get a handle on expenses and continuing to drive improvements of care.
That's great. Beverly, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I take it from, again, my career perspective, but that everybody deserves an ambulatory anesthetic. That this is an approach that actually we are building out from what we are doing now in terms of looking at the patient length of care and bringing patients into anesthesiologists were among the founders of the Freestanding Surgery Center system, that they had a vision that this was a better way to provide health. And they went to the insurance companies and fought for payment. Said, we can show you, outcome-based, evidence-based, we will show you this is better for patients. So we need to continue on these trajectories that we are doing, continuing to build it out longitudinally and laterally, and can only do that with all the other healthcare professionals involved. It is team-based care, and again, the first surgery centers were founded by 2 anesthesiologists, but they got the surgeons engaged with them as partnerships, and the nurses, and the administrators.
Just to build on that, I think the future, if we're going to be really successful, is going to demand that we build up very effective, very well thought out systems of care. We have to be able to do that at the same time that we maintain the individual excellence of some of our hospitals with their high-end care. But when we look at rural populations and underserved populations, it's really going to only be cooperation through systems of care that address those needs. It's a completely unmet need right now, so there's a lot of upside in that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for joining us. Congratulations on your this past year.
Wonderful year.
Yeah, as you are handing over the torch, what's next for you?
Well, first of all, I'm not done yet. What the immediate past president does is
got a lot of work to
mentor the people coming into the system. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed, I do like setting up processes, is I think that we have been working together developing a longitudinal partnership in leadership. That instead of being, this is Beverly's year and the next is Randy's year, that we have been working together this year and with Mike Champeau coming in to have a continuum of leadership. We have different interests, different thrusts, but it's all in the same framework. And what I can do as a leader is to have Randy start at a run already and not have to spend the time come up. This is terrific. So I think it's the immediate past president is sort of a mentoring role, which I just love, and so there's plenty of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Randy, congratulations to you.
Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk, Anesthesiology, a retrospective. This piece was released to remind you about the ASA, the American Society of Anesthesiologists' annual general meeting, Anesthesiology 2022. We're going to be providing lots of special programming, so make sure you've subscribed to TopMedTalk, and also make sure you check out our newsletter. Go now to edpom.org. TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EdPom, evidence-based perioperative medicine. edpom.org for all the information that you need.